Alrighty, the time has finally come to describe the rules for Grimdark Dungeons, a 40k role-playing game.
Unlike regular 40k, Grimdark Dungeons is a combination of D&D and Warhammer 40k rules. This game plays completely differently than a normal game of Warhammer 40k and feels a little bit more like Kill Team in its gameplay. Things that you'll recognize is that it still uses the entire rules from Warhammer 40k. You can use either 9th or 10th edition or any other edition and use that for the combat. What I mean by that is once combat is initiated with models, you just use the regular Warhammer 40k rules, which is great. So most of the game you already know how to play, it's already done. So the rules are actually only 2 pages long. There are 2 pages of rules, and most of that is examples of how to play the game. So we'll go into that, but I'll just start right now with what kind of game it is. With it being a combination of D&D and Warhammer 40k, I'll show you what I mean. When there's no enemies around, and what I mean is when they're in these enclosed buildings, it counts as an enclosed building that they can't see into or out of. So in this case, there's no monsters in their area. They can adventure freely. They don't have to worry about measuring or really any of that kind of movement stuff. So if this guy, this is the main character, Ignatius, if Ignatius wanted to go to this treasure box, he can go there and then he can do a roll to open it. And we can go ahead and show what a roll would be. All stuff that wouldn't normally be in Warhammer 40k is done with a D10. So let's say his survival skills or his thief skills or something like that, based on, I'll show you how to make a character. Let's say it's a 5. He needs a 5 or below to succeed. Anything above that isn't going to work. Alright, so he wasn't able to get into the treasure this turn. So we also have these guys. They're going to go move. This one's going to go, knocked over the bowl. This one's going to go try. And let's say his is a 6. He gets a 7 as well, and neither were able to get into the treasure at this time. It's kind of hard to pick into those, and they're low-level characters. If combat was initiated, and it's clearly going to happen with the models this close, once they see each other, normal 40k rules begin to happen. The enemy is controlled as an AI that moves closest to the enemy, or closest to the model nearest them. So Ignatius is right here, so they're all going to move closest to him, and it's based on a very rudimentary line of sight system. If you were behind this corner, if we put him here, these enemies are not going to move towards him or activate in any way because they don't see him. But if he were to come here, they're going to come right towards him. So once combat's initiated, you would still roll one of these first. In this case, he gets a 9, and that too is too much for him to initiate his extra combat abilities. So he's not going to get any extra stuff, which we'll look at later. This is how I added some fun spiciness from the 40k rules to the regular version of this game. It basically makes it so when you roll, it's a reaction, and my character reacted poorly, and that can basically have a negative reaction where he has -1 shooting and stuff like that. So it's all about this reaction dice. This is an action dice so that you can do stuff like, instead of fighting them, I'm going to go in here and use my action, and on a, let's say 7 or below, okay, I got a 6. On 7 below, I get inside the Iron Maiden. So then you could get inside this Iron Maiden and hide while the bad guys pass by. And in this game, that's a totally acceptable thing to do, while in 40k or Kill Team, you wouldn't be able to do that. This dice represents rule of cool. Anything that you would want to do with the environment, you simply roll. I want to hide in this tree. He gets a 3, he's good to go. He can hide in the trees, and now his character cannot be targeted because he's hiding up in the trees. It pretty much allows you to do the things that you would want to do. I had this guy throw a table, he took this table and threw it across the lava to make a bridge through that door. And that's totally acceptable for this game. They also put stuff in front of the door to make it harder for enemies to come in, and that's going to be reflected with rolls from this. So the game is Warhammer 40k with a small amount of role-playing. It does occasionally have NPCs. You can write their dialogue, or if you're comfortable with it, you can pitch it right then and there. Now that you've seen the basics of what the game is, I'm going to go over some rules, and you'll be really happy to see this is not your typical role-playing game. It has barely any rules. So we'll get started.
Grimdark Dungeons is a simple mix of basic role-playing games and 40k combat rules. The game can have one or many dungeon masters as it is intended to be relaxing, fun, and intriguing experience. Non-combat rules. When interacting with the game, any decision the player makes will result in some form of dice roll with the D10 system. Based on your level, each test will be done, and based on the result, the goal is completed. This includes NPC interactions, items, and environmental hazards. Example: Captain Gallimir wants to hide under a desk to avoid being seen by the jailer. The players agree that this is a survival test. He has a survival skill of 5, which means on a 1 through 5, he succeeds at this goal of hiding. If he rolls a 6 through 9, he does not succeed and has failed the test. I guess that would be a 6 through 10, that's my bad. Now is the time to roleplay and decide what has happened in the game. If he succeeds, he gets under the desk just in time before the jailer opens the creaking wood door. If he fails, he doesn't fit and the table is knocked over. The jailer rushes through the door and sees you. The jailer grabs his whip, and now the combat rules begin. So the basic idea is that you're just rolling to do things within the environment. I want to climb this ladder, and I want to eat this food. I want to flip over this table. You have to roll a d10. Combat is very similar to non-combat D10 rules. If you encounter an enemy, a combat roll will be made before resolving combat with Warhammer 40k rules. The D10 simulates your response to combat. Are you prepared, ambushed, exhausted? The D10 rolls can either result in failure or success, nothing in between. When deciding how you react to combat, bonuses and negatives will be rewarded based on the roll of the D10 before battle. If you succeed a combat roll, you may double your rate of fire, increase damage by 1, increase armor piercing value by 1, +1 to magic summons, overwatch on a 4+, wound rolls 6s result in mortal wounds and regular damage. You can roll either a d6 and choose one of these, or pick when you get when you roll the d10 and you get the right number, you can get one of these before combat. And as you get higher level, you can get multiple of them. So you can have these bonuses, which makes it a little more exciting than basic Warhammer 40k combat, because you're getting bonuses and also negatives. If you fail a combat roll, you lose, and it's only one, so I need to make that clear. You could lose one attack or a magic summon. It could cut your rate of fire in half to a minimum of 1, decrease damage output by 1 to a minimum of 1, minus -1 to magic summoning, no overwatch, -1 inch to movement and charge. So it could be one of those. It's easier to just roll a d6. If you roll a d10, you failed, then you roll a d6 to see which one of these happens. In some scenarios, you may choose to roll a d6 to decide which benefits or negatives your character has taken. This is great for random encounters and ambushes where preparation would be key. Example of a game implementing the complete rules. Captain Gallimir is in danger. He failed his survival roll, and now the jailer has come to imprison him once more. The jailer growls as he extends his whip. It's time for a combat roll. Rolling a single close combat D10 roll, he needs a 6 or less to succeed. He gets a 5, meaning he succeeds. The attack by the jailer came from nowhere, so it's time to roll a D6 to determine what ability he may have gained. The D6 is rolled, and he gets a 2. Looking at the chart, he has 1 extra attack for this battle. Normal 40k combat proceeds until the battle is ended. If the enemy is defeated, roll a d10. Whatever your highest skill is can be used to create a fabulous finisher. Captain Gallimir rolls a 6 with his d10 and manages to shove the jailer into the lava pit, melting him almost instantly. So basically, you defeat this Alpha Legion model here. You've just defeated him. He's about to be removed. Well, now you can decide how he's removed. You roll the d10, and we see we got a 6, so he's good. Just like in the example. So he's good to go, and I decide he's going to kick him into the lava. He's not going to spare him. He's not going to talk to him or ask him for information. He is just going to kick this guy into the lava and incinerate him, and then look, there's a melted spinal column there now, and he's been vaporized by the lava. Alrighty, you've seen the basics of the game now. It's pretty much everything, but now here's some added stuff that makes it a little fun. Leveling up. Each completed quest can give a maximum of 5 skill points as a reward, or you can cut the results of a d10 in half, rounding up to randomly generate skill points. Money. Currency in trading is used to acquire better equipment. Gold remnants can be directly spent, while some items like gems can be sold to a trader for more gold remnants or new equipment. Currency can be earned through jobs, heists, looting, and most common of all, dungeon crawling. So that's what we have so far, and then we go to the advanced rules. Death. If a character dies, they can promptly come back in the next game, though there are complications described in the special abilities section of the character builder. I will show you that at the end. NPCs are not as lucky. NPCs all die permanently and once killed will not be returning in any ways. Movement. Combat movement is the same as Warhammer 40k, but non-combat movement is usually not measured and more appraised how far a character could go in their turn. Turns. Basically, you should take turns between players, but there is no limits on the player's turn until combat is entered. So basically, you could go open 3 boxes and walk around and do all kinds of stuff, but once you go into combat, it's the same 40k. It's their turn, your turn, back and forth. So kind of like Final Fantasy. You can wander around doing whatever you want, but once you're in combat, you're following some really strict rules on movement and everything else. So that's how that works. Game Masters. This game has a very loose version of the Dungeon Master system seen in other role-playing games. You are expected to act as the fellow player's GM, and they should do the same for you. Together you write the story, control the obstacles and villains, and level up your characters. This game allows GMs to be players and GMs at the same time, so the Dungeon Master can play the game and control the bad guys in this, and the story, which is cool. Example. Player 1 enters a dark room alone and knows that the jailer is near. Player 1 decides to hide in a shiny Iron Maiden. Both players agree that the test should be survival, and so Player 1 makes the roll. It is failed, and she cannot enter the Iron Maiden. Player 2 now decides how the nearest jailer responds to the failed roll. Player 2 decides that the jailer heard you trying to pry open the Iron Maiden, and now he is trying to open the room but can't remember which key to use. Quickly, Player 1 and 2 decide it's time for Player 1 to decide to try to hide again. Player 1 is sticking with the Iron Maiden plan and rolls again, this time successfully getting inside. Now Player 2 describes how the jailer finally has come through the door just as Player 1 gets inside the Iron Maiden. Alright, so here's the character builder page, and this is one that's not filled out. I'll show you both. But it's got name, faction and allegiances, rank, position in society, demeanor, motivations, special abilities. I will describe that. I haven't put the special abilities together yet, but it's basically you get to decide when your character dies, what negative thing happens to him each time he dies. You can decide anything. It's totally up to you. So each time your character dies, come up with some kind of negative that happens. That's your special ability. It's fine. So character stat builder, the way this works is you get 30 skill points to spend at the very beginning, 1 for each category, and then you can spend an additional 20, and here are the categories. Close combat, ranged combat, combat magics, healing magics, creative magics, survival skills, charisma/scary, agility, defensive magic, raw power magic, extreme strength. So those are the options, and then there's short bio for your character. And now I will show you what this looks like when you fully fill out the character. This is the example. Name, Ignatius Galamir. Faction, Death Guard, Buzzsaw Detachment, Death Legion. Rank, position in society, Plague Marine Captain. Demeanor, depressed, artistic, clever, loyal, strategist, empathetic, ruthless, violent, spiteful, hates pointless wars, loves fighting for a cause. Motivations, Femora's love and approval, becoming worthy of godhood, discovering who he is in past lives, protecting Femora, protecting his men, vengeance, pain, would like to kill Abelus Cain, and Abaddon with his own sword. Special abilities, who comes for the Reaper. So this is an example of a death ability, and I came up with a really extensive one for him since he's part zombie, since he's Death Guard. So, who comes for the Reaper? This ability allows Ignatius to return from death in any following game of Grimdark Dungeons if he died for Femora. That's the other player, her name. He died in a heroic in any heroic way. So if he does anything that's heroic, he gets to come back. If Femora will die without him, he may be instantly resurrected on a 6+ with any magic type. Fomora has, but he will return with only 1 wound of health remaining. So he can be brought back instantly, or if he comes back in the next game, he has to have either died heroically or for Fomora in any way. If his death does not reach these conditions, he will still return in the following game with less memory of adventures with Fomora and more memories of the endless wars he struggles with. If he dies this way too many times, he will eventually forget Fomora and become a mindless corpse, a minion to yet another everlasting battle. 3 deaths like this in a row will result in a transcendence to Plague Marine and the end of his manhood. In other words, if he dies too many times unheroically, he will literally eventually become a corpse and not a man at all and just be a zombie. So that's how my special ability works. Anybody can come up with how their special ability works, but it has to do with how your character reacts to the fact when they die. Character stat builder, you can see what I chose for a close combat, a 6 and below. So if I suddenly get ambushed, if I roll a 6 and below on a d10, I have a really good chance of getting some benefits. Ranged combat, not so much. If that's the test, 3 or below, I'm not so good at that. I'm not good at combat magic. I'm really good at healing magics. I'm a bit of a paladin. So on a 5 or below, I can heal and heal others. Creative magics, I don't have that at all, pretty much. Survival skills, I'm a 5, so hiding behind that desk kind of thing. Charisma, scary, this is how I convince NPCs to do what I want. I'm kind of high up there, I'm 4 something. For being an early level, 4 is pretty good. Agility, not very much at all, so I'm not going to be jumping over anything. Defense magics, just a 1. Raw power, extreme strength, he's a 2. This is eventually going to give him some really cool abilities that you can come up with as the game goes on. Short bio, I don't even know if this needs to be read. I don't think it's important, but yeah, that's the little biography of who you think your character is going to be and where he came from and stuff like that. So let's take a look. All right, we're going to do a little example of how the game would work. Right now, there's no enemies around, so the 2 continue. They can continue rolling for treasure for no repercussions because there's nothing around. So they can roll again, and we'll show them. Yep, they're over here by the treasures. This character and this character. We'll get this guy out of here. So these 2. Sorry, my terrain is doing its own thing. All right, so these 2 are opening treasure again. All right, he gets into his. And now he has treasure. He gets some gold remnants. So next time he can get a better bolter or some new armor or something that gives him a better save. You know, I'm going to have little traders and stuff like that that you can interact with. But anyway, so they're doing that. The characters decide to head towards the dungeon where they know combat will be. They can still free move because there's no enemies. So look how far they're moving. They're going all the way across the board. And there's no repercussions because there's no combat yet. As soon as they open this door, which would take an action, we'll say it's we can call it a combat one. So it'll be a 6 and below. I failed, so the other guy's going to try. They get it. The door opens. Alrighty. As soon as we open the door, we're looking down the barrel of enemies. Because there's line of sight, they can see them, and now the enemies start to activate normally. And they're going to move 6 inches with a measuring stick. I don't have that, or I don't have a tape measure right now. But imagine they'd be just about here. So there's all these Space Marines coming out. Oh, knocked over stuff. Of course I did. The Space Marines are coming at them. Doors open. The enemies immediately move towards them and begin their shooting. And if they can charge, they'll try to charge. Because the distance is greater than 12 inches, they can't charge this turn. So they just shoot their pistols. And once they're done, we go back to the players. The players then decide, since they are interacting in combat now, to move. Ignatius can only move 5 inches in combat, so he goes right here. And this Plague Marine can only do the same, so he can go right about here. So now they do normal shooting with D6, everything that you would do in 40k, and they do their combat. The only thing that I've forgotten is their reaction to this combat. Let's see how they react to seeing the enemy. We'll say it is a shooting test, or a survival test, because it's an ambush. Alright, his survival skill is 5, so they fail it, so they're going to take a minus to something. And we'll say -1 attack, so they have 1 less close combat attack each. So they are surprised by this. They've been ambushed, oh boy. And so now they're going to roll their combat. Let's say they shoot and do their D6s, and they manage to kill an enemy, and that's it. They can close in now. They can do their charge rolls, which say Ignatius makes it, and cleaves, 2 more of them. Enemy does his attack back. Maybe Ignatius gets a wound. And then it is the enemy's turn again. Let's say they move in and try to do this, or they couldn't charge. So it's the enemy's turn again. They attack. They do the attacks with the power fist. He gets hurt some more, and he cleaves this guy as well. And now the combat situation with them is over, but there are others around the area. It activates him, so now he would move his 5 inches and see if he could charge. So it's a reactive combat system where as you move, it keeps like having things, finding you and getting involved. And it's basically all based on line of sight and a really basic AI system where the enemies just move towards the closest guy there. So that's what combat would look like. If you defeat this guy, like they fight and he destroys him, then you would roll one of these, and we'll say on a 7 or below, he gets 1. So on a perfect one, he kicks him in, and lava kills him. So that is how the game works. It's just basic 40k with a couple of D10 rolls in there. So nice, simple game. Hopefully I can get this video all together, and it will make sense, and you'll get an idea of what it's like to adventure and get to be within the 40k universe. You have all the benefits of D&D storytelling and the wonderful universe of Warhammer 40k in a really simple package.